To start off, a single point that was reiterated throughout the entirety of the discussion was Steam support. An obvious hot-button issue within the community, as pretty much everyone has a Steam horror story. Newell stated that since the last AMA, which took place back in March of 2014, quote, "We've introduced refunds. They were kind of forced. Grown support staff by roughly 5 times and shipped a new ticketing system. Newell views response times and quality of the responses as the crux of the system, and seems to be the main focus with improvement. The problem with support seems to be the implementation of the features rather than the features themselves, as many complain that this touted refund system is way too restrictive on its guidelines, and the faster response times seems to be a trade-off for quality, as most of these responses seem to be automated and not even related to the issue presented. Obviously, creating a support system for a service as large as Steam is no easy task. However, the length of time for these issues to even get public acknowledgement does seem unreasonable, although characteristic. In the last AMA, Source 2 was one of the only topics that received an actual response, and back then it seemed that the engine was making some good progress for a somewhat new release. However, it's nearly 3 years later, and in response to the question, does Valve plan on doing anything with Source 2, Newell responded that Source 2 is still Valve's primary game development environment, and that Source 2 is the foundation for some, quote, unannounced projects. He states they want to have everybody developing in the same engine, and that Source 2 is intended to be available to the, quote, broad development community as soon as we can, free of charge. Now, these unannounced projects, according to the post leaks that we've heard of in the past, are Left 4 Dead 3, Half-Life something, and HLVR. However, I'm still sticking with the idea that Valve's next VR title is going to be Unity-based. Now, yes, the Half-Life VR leaks that have all happened have been in destinations in Dota 2, both of which running Source 2, so that may speak otherwise. However, this may just be Valve messing with us. Source 2 as an engine hasn't seemed to be Valve's focus, so although someone may still be working on it, we know that a third of Valve is working on VR, which has been Unity-driven in the past. And as we've learned from other answers, many more than previously known are still working on Source engine games, so what is being said here is up for interpretation. I don't see the full SDK release of Source 2 happening anytime soon. However, I have been surprised before. For example, D. Riller, known TF team developer, also answered some questions. He confirms the current TF member count being 16, much more than previously thought. However, D. Riller explains that this number includes artists, writers, and sound engineers, so the number of true game developers is still unknown. With the comic's recent release, we really don't know what these non-game dev members are working on. However, it most likely ties into the next major updates, which, as D. Riller restated, has something to do with a new campaign, which, for those who are unaware, those are contracts, not a single-player campaign, pyro weapons, matchmaking improvements, and balancing. Now, Ido, a Counter-Strike team member, also answered some questions, most importantly going back to the topic of Source 2. Ido, when asked if CSGO would be getting the port treatment seen within Dota 2, he states, quote, "Source 2 is a bunch of system rewrites. For Counter-Strike Global Offensive, we evaluate these new systems on their individual merits. Some CSGO rework is in progress, such as the UI that utilizes parts of Source 2, and other systems might follow. Some Source 2 systems might never be right for CSGO. Now, I want someone to please explain how Source and Source 2 work. Can game engines change different features in between them? Like, I understand how this might make me sound, but can 2 independent game engines exchange features between them as easily as they are saying? Unless Source 2 is just that much similar to Source Engine, and Source 2 is really just Source 2017. Ido also responded to questions about the new updates for CSGO, and he said that there were no set release times for the new operation, and that instead the new UI system, CSGO moving to new territories, and that, quote, "We plan to continue updating every week or 2. As for the operation, we weigh that work relative to other work we can focus on, and the other recent work seemed better for the project." Now back to Mr. Newell. In response to a question about Left 4 Dead 3, Gabe gives the second best answer in the entire AMA. First, let's give some background. Back on May 17th, 2015, Jeff Keighley releases the only episode of what he calls the Game Slice podcast. Now I bring this up because here, Gabe answers a question about future games by referring to every IP as a tool.
It's like, if you think of it as each one of our franchises represents a tool, and so you just want to pick up the right tool at the right time. When we're thinking of what are the next challenges, then we tend to pick the franchises that are sort of most useful in going forward. And if we don't have one, then obviously we have to create a new one.
And if we look at this response, it's almost the same kind of explanation, but with added detail. Essentially, what Newell is stating here is that when it comes to game design, it is the idea or creative force to change things that comes first. And if an existing IP could suit the idea well and push it further, then a new game in a series is created. And as long as the people involved freely want to finish the project, then we will see that new game. In the recent response, Gabe explains all of this, and then states, quote, "Left 4 Dead is a good place for creating shared narratives. Valve wants to work with shared narratives, and Left 4 Dead is is a tool to do so. Now granted, Left 4 Dead 3 has been around since 2012, but still, great answer. Lastly, Half-Life. Since Gabe had a much larger hand in development of Half-Life 1, he views the game as a series of compromises and trade-offs. So instead, he views Portal 2 as his favorite single-player Valve game. Also, he doesn't like Zen. He then rapid fires. Half-Life and Portal movies are coming. A new IP in the Half-Life/Portal universe? Yep. Is Valve working on a fully fledged single-player game? Yep. And yes, depending on how you look at the wording of these questions, then they could mean anything. However, it's not worth doing because I could ask very specific worded questions myself. Because, well, he ignored my 2 real questions to tell me that, yes, I can conduct an interview with him. If you guys want to be able to check out some other content that I have a big hand in working in, check out the channel Electra News Network. I don't really know how to describe it, but it is my girlfriend Electra being more entertaining than I can ever be. Check it out. Link down in the description below. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Tyler McVicker. This is Valve News Network. Have a good day. Adios.